Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cloud-Based Mayhem. My guests today are the core group of what has just been formed. We're calling the U.S. Women's Team. And if you haven't been noticing lately, our U.S. women are crushing, is the only way to put it. Jenny O'Neill, Galen Kirkpatrick, Violeta Jimenez, and Alexia Fisher are my guests. And that's just the core group. There are others on the women's team, of course, but these four have been performing at a remarkable level as of late. Galen, as you heard on a recent show, and just had her independently on a recent show, but she's our current U.S. National Champion. She was just on the podium and the overall at the Monarca. She won the Red Rocks Wide Open, and she was on the podium at Chelan again in the overall. Violeta is always just right in there. She's, I think, second or third right now in our NTSS, which is our U.S. ranking. Alexia Fisher just crushed down at the British and at the pre-PWC, the Nivea pre-PWC down in Colombia, and she was, I think, fifth and then sixth in those two. And she's now the highest ranked U.S. pilot in the WPRS, period, not just women, but period. And Jenny O'Neill just recently stepped up to an Enzo, did, I think, 10 comps, she said in the interview here, just last year alone, and is in the top 15 in the NTSS, and just remarkable how fast she's come up through kind of the system and up through comps, and is... These all four ladies I just interviewed on the practice day down in Baishu, Guangdu, so they're all preparing for the super final, which is going to be going by the time this gets out, but should be early on there. So watch them and all the rest. I'm sure many of you are at the pwc.org or pwca.events, and you'll see the link to the super final, and it's really fun to watch. You can watch it all on live tracking and in real time and see how these girls and the rest of them do. But we get into how this has happened. They've all had a pretty unique, their own kind of journey to get to this point. And now with the recent formation of the team and what they're doing at all these comps and working together and strategizing together and really working towards a common goal and also independent goals. They're all working on independent performance, but it's been incredibly inspiring to see, and to see how they've kind of unlocked the code so quickly, and how they're really raising the bar, not only for women, but for all of us. And they are definitely, it's no longer just kind of, the women's side of things and getting on the women's podium, but going for the overall and gunning it really hard just across the board. They're definitely the ones to beat now, certainly in North America, and I think we're going to see great things from each of these women. We already have, but on the world scene. So we wanted to do this interview before the super final goes, because this is a big one coming up, and there's some really fun topics here, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I do want to say at the end, we get into setbacks. Each of these ladies have had some pretty difficult things to go through. And when we got to Alexia, she had an accident and coming up to this point, and had never really talked about it publicly. So this wasn't the right time, but she just wanted me to say that she has also, and she didn't want to just not answer the question, but she has also had a pretty serious setback getting to this point. But we talk about all that with the others and get into how and why and how they've managed to carry on. The passion is high here with this group. The fun is high. They've brought a whole new dimension to the U.S. paragliding scene and community, and many of you have heard about, of course, the amazing parties we have, and we'll get to show those of you who get to come over to the World Cup in Monroe this fall, and we'll host you in style. Please enjoy this talk with a fantastic group of women. Cheers. Good afternoon, ladies. How are you?
Hi, Gavin.
Hi.
I am talking to Jenny and Galen and Violeta and Alexia. They're on their practice day. They're the day before the big one. The super final starts tomorrow down in Baishu, Guangdu. And we thought it'd be really fun to sit down with these crushers and find out how they got here and what are some of the things that they've all been through, and the women's team and strategies and coping situations and setbacks and a bunch of fun stuff. So we're going to get into that, but I thought for the audience's sake, let's do some introductions, starting with Jenny. Where are you from? How long have you been at this game? Give us a quick rundown on your flying and comp flying resume, and then you can each just hand it off to the next person.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jenny. I sort of live in Colorado, but I've been basically traveling and paragliding for the past 2.5 years. I started flying in 2020. I did my first comp about a year later, the Applegate Sprint. And in the past 2 years, I've probably done, I think this will be like my 20th comp and my second PWC. So.
This is your second PWC, the super final.
Yes.
That rings true to me. That's how mine was.
Yeah.
I did a World Cup and then a super final back in 2012. That was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And you've just recently stepped up to the Enzo, correct?
Yeah, I just was in Colombia and I did two comps on the Enzo, and so yeah.
How's it feeling?
It feels good. In Colombia, it was a lot more turbulent, I would say, and flying it here feels really nice. So,
Thanks, Galen.
Yeah, I'm Galen. I'm from Washington State. I sort of live in California in a van or on a boat, and I've also been doing a ton of races the last couple of years. I've done about 30, and about 10 or 12 of those have been PWCs or other Cat 1 competitions.
Yeah, your first was X-Ray, correct? In Turkey in 2021?
Yeah, my first was X-Ray, and then I did a bunch that season, and then the next season, and that leads us to here.
Violeta.
I'm Violeta, and I've been flying, it'll be 10 years in September. And I entered the World Cup scene around the same time as Galen. We both flew in Aksaray in 2021. That started a lot of competition flying for me, so I didn't count before this interview, but it's been a number, and it's been a really fun ride.
Alexia.
I'm Alexia. I'm from Seattle, Washington, and I've been flying for 5.5 years. And my first PWC was Costello a year ago.
In Costello just a year ago, just last March.
Yes.
And you're all at the super final. That is super duper awesome. Okay, so we'll do the same. We'll start with Jenny again, but I'd love to hear from each of you. None of us are Kriegel. None of us started this when we were 0. We've all gotten to this when we were basically adults, but I'd love to hear something about your history just so the audience can learn a little bit more about where you came from before you got into flying, and specifically what is one thing you did before you got into this sport that you think has really helped your success or helped you get to a place where you can be with the best in the world at the super final in Baishu?
Yeah, so before I started paragliding, I was doing a lot of climbing and slacklining. And before that, I was a competitive gymnast for pretty much my whole childhood. And I think there are a lot of aspects of that way of competing that kind of parallels to paragliding in some way. So that kind of helped shape a competition mindset for me. One thing that I do think helps a lot is that I've also worked for like 10 years as a software engineer, and I've been able to give myself a lot of free time and the finances I need to do this sport, because it's very expensive and it takes a lot of time. So I've been able to like work remotely from anywhere in the world, so I can be where the flying is good, and that's helped me progress as fast as I have, I think.
Excellent. So mindset and work-life balance. There's a lot of software engineers in the sport. It's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of
just
engineers.
gives you the time.
Yeah.
Jenny, talk about, Will Gadd always talked about that when he saw climbers get into sport, it always made him way more nervous than flow sports. Someone coming from skateboarding or surfing or mountain biking, when you're dealing a lot with gravity from a non-static kind of position, obviously the climbing has the risk side and the just exposure side for sure. But do you think that climbing was more important or was gymnastics? Because gymnastics I see is fantastic, balance and flow and strength.
Yeah, I think gymnastics set me up for a lot of things in life, both like mentally and physically. Climbing is when you paraglide, climbing seems really safe, I would say, in comparison. With gymnastics, you just learn from a young age a lot of, like you were saying, balance and motor skills, which isn't a huge part of paragliding, but it certainly, helps make you safer at launching and landing. And then the mental side of gymnastics, it's a hugely mental sport. It's difficult. You have to make yourself do scary things a lot and remain calm in those situations. So
I like hearing this because my daughter's in gymnastics. So
yeah, that's great.
Galen.
Well, y'all already heard from me, so I'll try to keep this sort of short. But I think one thing I didn't mention, I have a history of doing improv comedy and like improvised theater. So I feel like a lot of good flying is improvisational. You're kind of like drawing from this skill set, or you have all these tools you can use, but when you're actually performing them, you have to get into the flow state. You can't get too up in your head about it. Knowing a lot, having this extensive toolkit, but then discarding it and just going to fly. In theater, you're not going to die, probably, but you do have this like social risk. You're like on stage in front of a lot of people and you're hoping to give them like a cohesive narrative or a funny experience. So paragliding feels in many ways like a lot simpler than that. You don't have to create a narrative. You just have to stay alive and stay in the air. And so I see parallels in that.
For sure. Me.
Yeah, so in thinking back on what I did before paragliding, I think it actually says more about who I am as a person, and then because I chose those things, I also chose paragliding. I've written a little bit in cross country about how my path through life hasn't really been predictable for a lot of people, and certainly paragliding took a lot of my friends and family by surprise as a thing I would want to do. So one of the big sports that I did before paragliding was ultra running, which is very different in certain ways, but perhaps the more transferable part of it is this idea of going through difficulty and coming out the other side, that work pays off in the end, that, if you put in the effort, and it can't just be the day of, if you put in the effort beforehand, then, you're going to be able to perform better when the time comes. But actually, one of the other things that Jenny grew up as a competitive gymnast, and I grew up as a dancer, actually. And I think that's in some ways been a really critical part of my development, again, as a human being, as somebody who literally moves through the world. Because in dance, specifically partner dance, you're constantly reacting to what your partner's doing, to, how you move, how you land, and you're trying to make it look good. So you're thinking about how you move your body through space a lot. And that's been very helpful as I've, moved through different parts of paragliding. But neither of those, I think, are directly transferable to paragliding. They're just sort of my background. I am a person who enjoys moving creatively and finding ways to solve a physical problem. And I'm also somebody who really thinks that there's nothing I can't do if I try hard enough, basically. So that's
hard
me.
Work.
Yeah.
Cool. Alexia.
For paragliding, I was really big into sailboat racing and did basically every single kind of sailboat racing, from small single-person dinghies to large 60-foot ocean racing. I feel like it transferred quite a bit because you're working in the similar elements, especially with the wind and water. And with the racing, it's very similar to paragliding competitions. You've got a start time and a start line, and then you've got marks, which are like turn points, and then you have to look at wind strength and wind direction as well as current, and it's similar to thermal strength, lines to fly, clouds, that sort of thing. So I feel like the strategy transfers quite a bit. And I did that for
Whenever I'm trying to describe to someone what we do, I often start off the sentence with, it's like sailboat racing in the sky. You know, you have waypoints and you're going upwind and downwind, and they're creating a task and they're creating a race course. It's super similar. There's a lot of ties there that relate. So we've got a climber, a comedian, an ultra runner, and sailboat racing. This is can come from a diverse history. You know, that's fantastic. You've all, when we're going to get into the coaching and how you're attacking the team stuff here towards the end, but I'd love to hear from each of you, and we don't have to do it in that order, whatever order you want. But do you all have a mentor? I know you've worked with Maxine Bellaman and worked with coaches quite a bit recently. Do you have a mentor, either comp mentor or just flying mentor, that has shaped how you fly, how you attack flying, how you think about flying?
I could start maybe, but the idea of mentorship, I recently, said that kind of Maxine Bellaman was sort of my flying guru or mentor. We've only worked together for, 3 days, if that. So it's been like very little person-on-person time, but I love his philosophy and what he brings towards flying. So I guess that's one meaning of that word mentorship. But another, I think, is sort of just accountability, like someone that supports you, who you enjoy spending time around with and who you like exchange energy. For that one, I'm going to give the answer of Kansas or Michael Hamill. He's like an old, he's a young comp pilot, but he's been doing comps, much longer than I've been flying. And he's just always been incredibly supportive of me. And, we really enjoy to fly together. So thanks, Kansas.
He's a special human. Who's next?
I can go. I mean, certainly all these ladies here have been that for me. And I think, there is really something behind representation matters. You see people doing it and you're like, oh, I can do that too. I was also fortunate to learn with a bunch of women and to have women who are all learning together and traveling together. And that's really helped me a lot. And then, all of the U.S. competition pilots, just being able to ask anybody anything and fly in all the U.S. comps over the past couple of years.
How about V?
Sure. So this is such a great question, Gavin. And as Galen said, we've been thinking a lot about mentorship as part of this team that we'll talk more about later. I would be remiss if I didn't give some credit. I spent a couple of years spending a lot of time with Mitch Riley, who I dated for a while. He's great. Shout out to Mitch. But he was a very, very helpful mentor at that stage of my flying journey. I think the last few years I've really spent a lot more time. I've worked with several sports psychologists, which has been really great. Kind of thinking, who am I in the sport? What do I want? What are my barriers? And that's been really important for my personal development. Like Galen, I also developed a relationship with Maxine Bellaman last year, who's been just fantastic. He's a great person who's continued to help give me strategic advice, and that's awesome. I would say there have been a number of other people in the U.S. community who've given me advice at times that I needed it, and sometimes they may not even have realized that they were doing it, but it's been really helpful. Bill Belcourt is somebody we all know, and I've really treasured the times I've gotten to pick his brain. Josh Cohn is another person who gave me some really great advice and recommendations in the last couple of years when I needed them. And really, this goes beyond the topic today, but I'd love to see us get to a place in the U.S. community where actually we can all develop that mentorship relationship with each other, where even if it's not, where Gavin, you and I are on the phone every month, maybe there's a time you can give me mentorship or I could give you mentorship. And I would love to see that happen, where we can all support each other and share some of our wealth of knowledge a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to you say that could be a whole show in itself. I mean, I think that one of the things that you ladies are doing is forcing all of us in a really good way, forcing is a negative term, but forcing all of us in a really good way to be more like the French, which is they're constantly getting coaching. They've gotten coaching since they were juniors. This is something that, it's hard to learn when you're in your own echo chamber and you're doing it totally on your own and you're trying to figure it out on your own. And you're not hearing from, I've been super fortunate to have mentors who live here in Sun Valley, but when it comes to comps, we're all just freewheeling, it's a very cowboy environment in the U.S. And that's another topic that I said we can talk about for a long time, but I really appreciate that with all of you that you're, hey, to get better, we got to work together.
Yeah. Well, and just real quick before Alexia goes, Gavin, we appreciate you, what you've done with this show, especially, worldwide, but also for the U.S. flying community. Yeah, we've got so much information, or you've been, your book and your show, so you're a big part of that.
I'm glad this isn't a video podcast. We don't be looking at me blush. Alexia, what about you?
So I started competition flying in 2021 with the Applegate Open, and I feel like it's been a bunch of mentors throughout my career, mostly Washington crushers. But that comp, Matt Sr. actually pushed me out of the sprint into the Open, saying, you should do this, you'll have more fun. And Owen Shoemaker, Matt Hensey, and when I started competing, these lovely ladies, I was very drawn to them, as well as Bianca, learning just how to do certain things in the air and fit in and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, great. Alexia on fire down in Colombia. It's going to be a fun week for you all this week. Okay, we're going to talk about breakthroughs, and you all suggested this. I thought it was fantastic, but you've all what I love about it is you're kind of all coming together, but you've all had very different paths getting here and kind of your own individual journeys, obviously, to get to this point of working together and even creating a U.S. team. I don't even know how long that's been a thing for the women's team, but talk about that journey a little bit, that independent journey, and then maybe along the way, I'd love to hear if there was kind of a breakthrough moment, whether that was just working, and you get there through hard work, like Violeta said, but was there a light bulb that went off in the path? And let's go, just so the listeners can orient, let's just go in the order we've been doing it. Start with Jay.
Yeah, so I started doing some of the sport class competitions first, which I find really helpful. It can be really frustrating to be in a B wing and a normal competition. You can't keep up, and you kind of miss out on some learning, I think. So if you're on one of the wings that can go the fastest with all these people, you can learn quicker. So I kind of did those first and then started stepping up wings, and I wasn't doing especially well. I just did a lot of competitions. I probably did 10 last year. And I think one of the moments I remember, I didn't do the PWC in Brazil last year, but I was there. And on the last day I flew the task, and I flew it very well. I was in the lead the whole time, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, whoa, I'm just doing it. I'm just following these people and keep doing the same stuff over and over again. And kind of after that, I was like, okay, I think I could do a PWC. I'm gonna ask for a wild card and see if they let me in, and they did. And then in Turkey, I kind of did the same thing and just stayed really consistent every day and did well.
So the aha moment was kind of oh, wait a minute, this isn't out of reach. This is something I can do. Yeah,
I felt like I had worked on all the technical skills a lot, flying a lot of cross country, doing a lot of competitions, and then it's I was just I want to try to climb as well as everyone and glide as well as everyone and do that over and over again. And if you continually do that, you'll get to goal with them. So yeah, just staying in the moment of that and not getting too ahead of yourself, or yeah.
Jenny, what was the catalyst to get into the sport? Because I think of everybody here, you've been in it the least amount of time. But what was
Yeah, so I started it pretty much during the pandemic. So I had been climbing, and I had been living in my car and climbing for a couple years. And I had seen paragliding, and I had seen how much money it cost. And I was like, I'll do that when I'm not living in my car and I, have a home and a job. And so once I ended up in Colorado, and I had a friend who was taking lessons in Boulder, and I just was like, oh, I'll just try it. And then, like everybody else, you try it and then you just can't stop doing it. So and you're like, oh, climbing, whatever, I gotta go paragliding. So yeah.
Yeah, my last day climbing was my first day kayaking. My first day paragliding. My last day kayaking was my first day paragliding. I said, oh, this is real fun.
Yeah, this is the coolest
Galen.
Well, let's see. Just really quickly, I think 2 years ago, I sort of had a breakthrough when I started really believing in myself. That was in Brazil, here in Baixo, for a PWC and then the Pan Americans. And I was just like, well, it's possible. Let's try this out. I didn't have any expectation on myself, and it went really well. And then I think this year I had a breakthrough when I started just being really nice to myself again and kind of owning my skill set or just believing in myself again. And then I'm just very excited for whatever the next breakthrough is. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I feel like it has to do with working together, like with these women and with the greater community at large, and just like continuing to open myself up and be comfortable and, perform.
Believe. Love it. Neat.
Awesome. So I'm going to give a little bit of a different story to start and then the same story to finish. The different story for me, when I started competing, which was, 5 years ago or something like that, I was on a small wing, and people told me, oh, the smalls don't go as well. But a real breakthrough was when I switched to a small medium. And this is something I want all small people to hear, not just small women, small men too, because I've seen people be incredibly frustrated, on a small Xeno at a PWC, and I've been there too. And I mean, I'm here to tell you that, if you can carry that extra 5 or 10 kilos of ballast, it makes an enormous difference. You won't believe how much. And where the sport was for me in the United States, despite having mentors, they were all bigger people than me. Nobody could tell me, what's the best way to ballast, and how much of a big difference it would make. And when I made that switch, which was at Monarca a couple of years ago, it enabled me finally to keep up, which was kind of amazing. And so that is a really critical thing for women, and again, small men, to keep in mind, is you are really, really handicapped if you're on the smallest size. It's needless. And in some ways, I had to relearn some things about flying once I got on a bigger size, because there are things you cannot do when you can't keep up that suddenly are possible, and you have to figure those out. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. That was a big breakthrough. Kind of following on what Galen and Jenny said, another thing is when you begin to trust yourself. And maybe that's a struggle that we all have for our entire flying careers, is how do you trust your instincts? When do you trust your instincts? When do you hold back? When do you push? I have felt those moments as well, where I realize, yes, I do trust my instincts here. It is time to go. These people are right. These people are wrong. Being able to trust yourself in those circumstances is the basis of comp flying, actually.
Do you think that comes from time in the saddle and just doing comps, or is that a switch in your emotions? Is that a switch in yourself?
I think it depends on how you as a person interact with yourself and what makes you trust yourself. For me, it is a certain amount of time. I don't trust situations and people until I know them really well, until I have a certain amount of knowledge. That's just who I am. Other people, I think, are more intuitive, and it might be more easy for them to make that leap to trust. But whoever, and that's part of the work too. You have to figure out who you are and what you need in order to trust yourself. And, we don't have to get into accident and injury here, but those things can make it a lot harder. Getting scared by something can make it a lot harder. So you need to figure out what your barriers are as well.
Great. Alexia.
So I had a little different beginning to doing sport class gliders, but I started doing them in the open class competitions and only a couple of sport class competitions. So my big thing was just trying to stick with the group as much as possible and not lose them. Like, is it 1 thermal after the start, 2 thermals, 3 thermals? And realizing that the only way to do that on a B and C wing was to climb as best as I could, climb better than them. So I really focused on climbing, and then moved up gliders fairly slowly and listened to mentors when I did that, and also did a bunch of practice at the lake SIVs. I just got on the Enzo in Turkey, and that again made quite a bit of a difference, especially since I could be confident on it and feel good under the wing. And then in Utah, I actually struggled a bit and bombed out twice, and so twice in a row. So that took a lot of pressure off, because it made me realize it's okay to fail. And so I had like all this internal pressure I put on myself, and getting that release allowed me to trust myself more, like the others were saying, having that confidence, and that like knowing that these ideas are good or my intuition is right. And that helped a lot there, and translated more into Colombia, and also getting a submarine and not a really blown out GR4.
Excellent. I think it'd be great to hear from each of you. You've kind of run the gamut here from learning to super final and all the things in between. I want to talk about setbacks here in a bit, but let's talk about advice to the folks listening who are thinking about getting into comps, whether they're a newer pilot or new to comps. Those can be two very, very different things. But we've got wicked pilots who never going to fly comps, but they might be thinking about it, especially after listening to this. And so let's start again with Jenny, because you're the newest one to comps. But looking back, if you could pull from that lexicon of knowledge, and pull out one thing that would be something you'd like to impart, something you wish you would have known.
I think if you want to do a competition, you should do it. You don't need to feel like you're maybe like totally ready for it to just try it. You can go and you can thermal in the start gaggle and you could bomb out on the first glide, but you're still going to get a lot out of flying with 100 people for an hour. And so I just think it's a really good way to learn. I did the sprint on an A-wing, which was like painful, an extra small A-wing. And a lot of people were like, why are you doing that? And I was like, well, everyone says comps are the best way to learn. So I'm just going to go and like see how it goes. And by the end of it, I was making goal the last few days. I was just making goal after it closed, but I was still there. And yeah, like Alexia, you get good at climbing, because that's the one thing you can try to do. So yeah, I would recommend, if you're interested in competing, finding a sport class competition and just trying it and not worrying about the results, just thinking about it as a way to get to launch every day and a way to fly with a bunch of people who are better than you and see how it goes.
Galen?
Yeah, I think that, not trying to be competitive, it's not really, you don't get to, or you ought not to be focusing on the competitive nature of it until you're ready to win it, which is, just the top 5 or 10 pilots, maybe. But I guess the advice, which would be like, become your own teacher, which that feels like an idiotic thing for me to say because I'm a paragliding teacher and I would like you to hire me, please. But, at a comp, you have all the pieces to put together yourself to imitate what these other pilots are doing and to see how they're doing it. And so it's a lot like a tour if you make it. So.
Yeah. So 2 things. First of all, people, I think, put a little too much pressure on themselves to when they start competitions. They think, oh, I have to be in it to win it. And like Galen and Jenny said, you actually don't. So what I wanted to say about that, they've already said a lot of it, is think about it like paragliding summer camp. These comps can be so fun. And even if you're not in it to win it, you should be there to see your friends and get transport to launch and be on a task where if you bomb out, somebody's going to show up in a nice van. If you go to the US comps, it's going to be a nice van with a cold beer or, cold water, which is awesome. But somebody's going to get you. Like, it's the easiest way to fly cross country. And then you're going to go and tell lies about it to your friends over burgers that night. It's going to be great, So think about it as a fun time to engage with your community, first of all. And our communities, I think, are a really, really important part of our paragliding careers. Now, here's the converse. There is a game within the game, right? If you like games, if you like sports, if you like to play chess, if you like challenges, there's some really cool stuff in there. So like Galen said, figure out a way to teach yourself. Figure out what are you, once you're at that stage where you're like, yeah, I want to go deeper. Like, what are you trying to learn? What is it to why you're getting dropped on glide? Is it how you can climb better? Is it how you can observe better? Is it how you can make decisions better? Figure that out, maybe make a couple goals for yourself and then teach yourself, take notes after your flight. This sounds really nerdy, but I'm saying if you're there and you're like, I want this, I want to get better, do those things. You can hire a coach like a Galen, for example, or a Maxime, or whoever, you can ask your buddy who's a good comp pilot, hey, can you give me some advice about what I can do better? So engage with it, and how I'm giving examples of how I learn, which I'm a nerd. I like taking notes. I'm very exhaustive with that sort of thing. Other people are different. Figure out how you learn and get back to it. Maybe it's just practice, but really engage, go deep.
Great. Alexia.
Yeah, I think anyone who wants to do a comp should do it. They're a ton of fun and a really great way to learn. And why they're such a great way to learn is you get to see immediately whether or not your decision was the right one or how well you're climbing or how well you're gliding. So having that immediate feedback is such an enormous help in your progression, I think, as well as just hanging out with your friends like everyone else said already.
I did a ton of work. Great advice. I did a ton of work before the last couple of X-Alps campaigns on the thing upstairs here on your head, and tons of sports psychology. And I worked with Thomas Therilow, who was Kriegel's supporter for years. It wasn't until this last one, and is a sports psychology coach. One of the many things he does, but what he wouldn't mention and what none of you mentioned is focusing on results. And that's not what you want to do, is focus on results. You want to focus on performance. You want to focus on your strengths. You want to focus on all the things, climbing, gliding, the little things that you can improve on, and the results will come. So that was cool listening to you guys talk about just the things that matter and the things that don't. Okay, let's talk about the women's team. I'm going to tell you what I think it is, and then you all just correct me, and you tell me what it actually is. It's been really remarkable, and it seems pretty recent to just see you all get together after the task comes out at each of these comps, and you kind of gather up. And I don't know what you're talking about, but it seems like you're talking about what the strategy for the task is, and maybe good lines and maybe bad lines and things you should be thinking about. And that's about all I know. So tell me what the women's team is, what your goals are, why you put it together, why it's necessary. And this one, I don't care about the order. Just take it. Each of you take it how you want to talk about what's going on, because we're all fascinated. We're all the men are all talking about it. I was just talking about the other day with Nate. What are they doing? I want some of that. I want to know what they're doing. I want to be part of this. I'm going to put a wig on it the next time I'm going to show up. And I love dressing up as the girl, so that'll be fun. So tell me, what is it? What's going on here?
Okay, so I'll start. I think one thing that you're right. This is a recent effort on all of our parts, and we saw that there's a lot of momentum around the fact that there are 4 of us performing at a very high level right now, which is an unprecedented situation in the US or frankly anywhere. That's why everybody's talking about it. And I want to be clear that one of our main goals, although all of us have individual goals and we all care about our own individual performance, one of our main goals is to ensure that this moment in time is not fleeting, that we capitalize on this and we make this the norm instead of the exception. And so that's really, I would say the thing that motivated us to start working together is like, how can we keep this going? How can we bring more women in, not just us? And where can we take this group of women? We've all gotten ourselves here on our own merits, by our own steam. And so that's probably the most important thing to say, first of all. And as to why it's important, I think our US community and our flying community in general is making strides as far as inclusivity. But when I started, for example, you could go through the lists at a PWC and you'd have to go through manually and look for women who were doing well. And it was really sad. I had nobody who really was an icon to me who I could say, this person showed me that I can do this, because what motivated me wasn't to be the best of a small group, but to be the best overall. I think we're changing that. Jenny mentioned visibility. That's a really critical thing. Had this been in place when I started, I would have had, people I could reach out to be like, how did you get there? I would have had just a path that was laid out that would be more clear for me, and that would have made it easier. I think I wouldn't have felt some of the struggles that I did feel. I wouldn't have experienced some of the doubt that I did feel. The last thing that I want to say, and I want to let my teammates answer this as well. I was reflecting at Monarca this year, which is when we launched our women's team, and we did very well by winning the top 2 teams, which was great with our combined women's teams. I was looking back to my first Monarca 5 years ago, and I was remembering, being on a small glider, seeing, maybe 5 or 6 women in the comp. That may not be entirely true. I don't remember how many there were, but there weren't a lot. And there was just this tacit acceptance that a woman would never be on the overall podium, would never be in the top 10. And that was just the way it was. And I accepted that too, even though I hated it. And now 5 years later, we have 2 teams of women on top of the podium. We had 3 women in the top 10. It was amazing. I mean, it was just everything that 5 years ago me would have needed to know and would have wanted to know to give me, to keep that fire burning, to keep going. And so that's to me why the women's team is important. For my dreams of 5 and 10 years ago when I started flying, I wanted that inspiration, and now we can provide it. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, before the next person jumps in here, that was awesome. I want to give some perspective here. About 5 years ago, I think, Violeta, was when I met you at that pizza place. More or less 5 years. You were a complete noob. I mean, you were completely new, and you were dating Mitch. And, I mean, it's just awesome that now all of us, and by all of us, I mean the men in the sport, are competing. It's not just the women's category where, like you said, you pretty much guaranteed a podium spot. That now it's, I think, Alexia, you're our top-ranked WPRS pilot in the country right now. Galen, you're our national champion. Violeta, you're second in NTS. I mean, I just looked at the results. And Jenny, you're brand new to the game. You're 15th in NTS. I mean, it's pretty awesome. And it's happened really quickly. That's interesting that I heard, so I wasn't too far off. So this Monarca at 24 was the first time you literally kind of put the team together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And someone else can take that.
I mean, I guess I just have a few things to say. One is that, we all just really respect and love each other. At the Monroe comp, there were 3 of us, and, Alexia had to go bomb out a couple times so that she could completely crush Columbia. But there very well could have been 4 of us in the top 10. And so, just kind of like working together and honoring each other and figuring out, what can we do if we, help each other be more of who we are and encourage each other to be great. We're all different pilots with different styles, but I think all of us have probably been on a women's podium and felt like that was an awesome thing to inspire other women, but that it didn't really matter in terms of the overall ranking. And so I know, I think we're all, it's okay, I can speak for everyone, but we're all like fighting for the overall podium. Seeing Meryl on the overall podium 2 years ago in the Columbia, like by 1.5 points, was incredibly inspiring. And seeing Violeta on the podium last year in Monarca, again, it's like, yeah, it's just, you see that, you become inspired, and then you want to make that a reality, both for yourself and for the people who you love and support. And so,
Yeah,
just experimenting.
I have to share a funny moment internally when we were down in Columbia at the pre-PWC. Alexia, the day before, I think Alexia, one of you was up front every day for the women's win, but Alexia, I think you were 5th or 6th that task day. And it was pretty stiff competition at the PWC. The meet director made a comment, he was wow, this is amazing. What did you do? And I went, not with these girls, dude. You don't know these girls. They're going to be up there all the time. And then you were. It was awesome. It was so funny. Yeah, okay. So a little bit more about that. Jenny or Alexia, tell me more about how this has encouraged you, how this is open to, new women in it. Why is it necessary? Why is this? I didn't know that it just happened at Monarca. That's pretty recent. But what are the plans for the future? I've asked a whole bunch of questions. Take whatever you want.
Yeah, I think speaking to what Violeta was saying, I came into this already seeing that it was possible, which is awesome. You hear oh, you can only ever be on a small, you're never going to be competitive. But at the same time, I'm hearing that I'm seeing the opposite almost. I'm seeing, Violeta and smaller men and whatever competing at the highest level too. So I'm sure that had some influence on me being able to come up as fast as I did. And what you were saying about the glider size, I didn't even consider what size to buy, because you just said buy mine, and I said, okay, I'll take Violeta. Sure. So yeah, I think, for me, just being able to see that right away, it shows that, well, it obviously had a difference, because I was able to do this so much quicker because of the women that came before me. So obviously we need it, and we need to keep it going. And one other thing to say is I think that we're very clearly inspiring other countries and making them realize that they need to do this too. Alexia and I were in Turkey, and Violeta and Galen were not, and so many pilots were like, wait, there's 2 more of you who are also doing well? What's going on over there? I don't understand. I've never seen this before. And they want that too. They want to have more women flying with them. So it's really cool to inspire the other countries as well.
I had a really special moment standing next to Revis at the party at Monarca, and I can't remember who it was, but one of the pilots from Mexico came up and brought me a shot of tequila, which I didn't need at the time, and he said, hey, I think we were 9 out of the top 10, right? We're U.S. pilots at the Monarca. And Monarca's pretty heavily U.S. pilots anyway. I mean, I'm not trying to shine too much of a light on that, but it was pretty remarkable. And then 3 of the top 10 were you ladies. And he just said, I've heard from a number of different people, both Norwegian and Mexico and other countries that were represented there, that, hey, something's going on here, and we need to start imparting this in our own pilots in our own countries and bring this. You guys are bringing it, and it's really cool. Galen, you and I talked about this a lot on our show, but it's the community aspect of it. It's not just the women's team; it's the community aspect of it is really neat to see. Alexia, do you have anything to say about the women's team and how that's affected your own success?
I think when I started, I had the support of Violeta, Galen, and Bianca, and that helped a lot, especially with the questions you don't want to ask the guy pilots, like how do you pee in the air and other things that are more women specific. And it also created this safe space, I guess, where I could ask more personal questions and get their take on things versus guys. And coming from sailing, that's also very male dominated, and they're also trying to do women's teams and women only regattas and women-only boats, and so it sort of transferred, and it's clearly helps a lot.
So, Gavin, we've
Yeah.
talked a lot about, how this has helped us and why it's important. I just want to add a little tactical stuff about, how this is coming together. So, as I said, this is very new. I want to give a shout out to Yushpa, first of all, which gave us some seed funding to get started. And we're really considering hard how we can best use not just the money, but the momentum and all the energy around this team right now. Really, as I said, we're trying to make sure this is the norm, not the exception. So that includes, bringing a lot of other women along for the ride. And, this is our third month of existence, basically. So we're just starting to try things. But one of the things we've been doing, you saw our briefings. Basically, wherever we have a group of U.S. women at a competition, we're trying to do briefings. We're trying to be on radio in the air if that's allowed by the rules of the competition. Most competitions do allow that. We're trying to get good at radio communication and get good at what information we can pass to each other in the air to help fly together. We've got a lot of other plans that we're thinking of too. Like perhaps having an SIV for women who are interested in flying competition wings, and perhaps cross-country flying together in pursuit. Just giving you a preview of the world record. And so lots of really cool goals that are coming together. I think the thing that we want everybody to know here is you're talking to four of us, maybe the four who are hopefully on the crest of a wave. And so we are really wanting to bring along the rest of the women in the US, and by extension, women globally as well. And so I think, you're seeing four right now, but it would be good to think of the women's team more broadly. And we are too. We're asking those questions of how can we, bring everybody else along with us and make sure that behind us four is another four.
Yeah. I hadn't planned on asking you this, but I feel like it's the timing is right. Just by nature of age, I've been at this quite a bit longer than you all have, and it's really inspiring to see what you've done. One of the things I'm a little worried about is you're all doing it a lot. I mean, you're investing a massive amount of time into this. Jenny, you say you did 10 comps or something last year. I was going to actually predict 15, but you're doing a lot of comps. You're dedicating a lot of time, a lot of travel. I think those of us who are a little more jaded and pessimistic and been in it a long time worry that this is a lot. It's the comp scene it's easy to burn out on, or to lose the passion on, or to lose the drive. Is that something you're talking about, considering, worried about? Are you feeling it at all? You're about to partake in the super final in the Worlds and the Pan Ams. These Cat 1 events they're an endurance race. They're long. Especially if you have a couple bad days, it's pretty hard to, it's kind of sometimes hard to climb out of that emotional hole.
Well,
anybody take that if you want.
Gavin, that's why we have each other. It's to keep us from booking a ticket home early and, going and crying in the poor weather back home. There was a bunch of questions in there, but maybe what I wanted to just say is when I did the PWC, the first one, Oxerai with Violeta, and we both qualified for the super final, which at that time was 14 months away. For me, I was just in kind of a special spot in life where I sort of had some time, free time and resources. And I was like, what if I, on my own, take this really seriously and train for this super final? Like, I just did my first PWC and I qualified, but I have 14 months. Like, what would it look like if I took a quote unquote professional approach to this training? And it was just an exercise for myself, and it was like fun. It's paragliding, But I guess since it's really difficult to make a living in paragliding, I think you see, there are far more incredible pilots or comp pilots than are represented on like the current score sheet, because people ebb in and out of it. And I think that's really natural, but there's certainly a fun or a really gratifying aspect to taking it seriously and treating it as if it were a real sport, or as if being in the top 50 or top 100 actually quote unquote mattered. It matters to us, and that's about it. But perhaps we can change that, or perhaps by working together and I don't know. I'll stop dragging on, but
that's a good answer. Anybody else want to comment on that? You don't have to, but
Sure, yeah. I do not plan on doing 10 comps this year. I will probably scale it back a little bit. I certainly do feel, especially after the 2 comps in Colombia, I was a little tired, and so just going to work on making sure it's still always fun, and when it doesn't feel fun, focusing on something else. But, I still plan on doing all of our, US comps because they're so much fun. Like you said, not just the flying part, but just hanging out with everybody. I just want to be there. So that's really motivating to just know that you get to hang out with your friends for a week in Chelan. It's the best. So
I also really enjoy the traveling aspect of it, seeing new countries and cultures and new places to fly. So that's one thing that motivates me a lot. Even if people are like, oh, you shouldn't go to Switzerland, it's going to rain 6 out of the 7 days. But if you look at the photos, it's stunning, and I've never been there, so I don't care.
No, it's
you go to a place like that, the flying is a bonus. That's the attitude you have to go in with. If you get to fly, great. If not, fine. Here's fun. Life's okay.
It's a great point. And Gavin, I'm going to add a little bit of a philosophical spin to the question of, how do you maintain interest, and, preface this with, I'm also an ultra runner, which means I'm probably insane, and a lot of people won't necessarily agree with me on this. But Galen said sometimes there's something really exciting in taking something seriously, and in seeing what can come out on the other side if you put in a lot. And to me, again, I've written about this a little bit in cross country, but it's sort of like the question of, how do you stay in love with one person? You've got a wife and a kid, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be together for a long time, Gavin. How do you make that work? Are you doing the same thing every time, or are you trying to keep it fresh somehow? And so really, I mean, this is a little bit philosophical and perhaps too much so, but I see my relationship with paragliding in a somewhat similar light. I may not do as many comps every year. This year, I'm actually trying to focus a little bit more on cross country in between the comps, because that's something I also love, and I've neglected it, honestly, for the past couple of years in favor of comps. There are so many expressions of the sport, so many new places to see, like Alexia said, so many people I want to fly with. For every person who goes in and out of the sport, we also have examples of people who've really stayed in some way or another, like Belcourt. Take Nick, who had a couple kids, came back, smashed it at the Pan Ams. There's all kinds of examples like that, and I think it's wonderful to see.
It does seem like once you kind of crack the code, thinking about people like Josh Cohen, you've kind of cracked the code. You can go do a lot of other stuff and come back and still, you're always going to expect somebody like Josh to be on the podium, no matter what he's doing in between comps and that kind of thing. And that is pretty exciting. That's certainly motivating to me. Excellent. Okay. I would love to hear that, none of us got here by this rosy, candlelit path of wonderfulness all the way through. There's some deviations, there's some roadblocks, there's some ditches. In some of your cases, there's been some pretty big ditches, setbacks. I'd love to just hear about struggle or struggles, plural. What have been some of the things you've had to battle through to be in Baishu?
Of course, this is the question that
so none. Nobody has any setbacks. You're all good.
I don't think any of us have struggled whatsoever, Gavin. It's rainbows and unicorns the whole way.
Super easy.
So I can go first because I let my teammates think about it. So I've written about this, and many people in the U.S. community in particular know. I've had a couple bad accidents, one of which a few years ago was really terrible. I could have died. I could have lost the ability to run, to walk, and I didn't, which is great. And go read Cross Country for the whole story and, a lot
It's
more
a great
about
story,
that.
by the way. Yeah,
Thank you.
fantastic.
Literature.
It's
literature.
Go read my
Yeah.
literature in Cross Country, more to come. But anyway, I think, that's been definitely a big challenge, has been recovering from that. And the physical recovery is one thing. The mental recovery, which I alluded to earlier, is another entirely. And the choice to fly again for me was, again, this is maybe why I think of it so philosophically. It was like, are you going to do this thing that you love again? So are you going to do it again? Are you going to stay the course? Are you going to break something else inside of yourself after so much has already been broken? And for me, being who I am, being the way I am, there was no answer I could give myself that felt right besides, I will try again, and I will see how I feel, and I will see, what I want to do. And I got in the air again, and I realized that my goals were largely the same. How it made me feel was largely the same, with a hefty dose of gratitude added in. And what was different was how I wanted to approach it. As people like Will Gadd say, you can never enter the air without risk. You're always going to be at risk. You cannot promise yourself you're not going to hurt yourself. But I did believe that I could be better, that I could make better decisions, that I could address some of the things that had led to, me almost dying. And I could mitigate some of those risks. And I have over the last few years, and I hope I will continue to do so. And in some ways, although, there's plenty of things in our lives we wish we could do again, if I had it to do over again, I would have, I would have made different choices so that I didn't have, those accidents. But I can't. And so the best thing I can do is kind of take that, Japanese kintsugi approach and paint gold over the broken places and say, maybe in some ways I'm better because I had those accidents, because I had those terrible things happen to me. I can now look at flying in a way that's, it's harder because nobody likes being scared, but that fear is what can keep us safe sometimes.
I heard you say you wanted to come back to the sport to, because you felt like you could mitigate the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You could become a better pilot.
Yeah.
How much of it was just the love of the game?
There was a lot of love of the game, but there was also a lot of fear, and the love outweighed the fear. You can't, it's now, I'm talking about flying as falling in love and being in love. You can't go back to an abusive relationship, Gavin. You have to find some way to say it's not going to happen again. You have to find some way to think it's healthy and feel that you're going to have a healthy relationship with it going forward. So that's what I had to do. And ultimately I did do it. All right. Everybody else, feel free.
I guess I feel pretty grateful, and it's partial. I'm sure it's also due to me being so new in the sport that I haven't had any major setbacks or injuries to speak of, and I try to make safe decisions. 2 years ago in Chelan, I did throw my reserve, and it did make me realize, I need to learn some stuff. So I spent a bunch of time over the water learning to stall my glider because I had not focused on that very much, and that definitely gave me confidence again, and flying acro too. So
well, I'll go next. I guess it would be appropriate to mention that I'm a trans woman, and I started transitioning right after I started flying about 7 years ago, which was about a year and a half before I started my first competitions, and about 2.5 years before I really started competing at the nationals or on the world level. And so when I finally made the decision to come out, it was really important to me that I didn't change anything, or that I didn't let that change anything about what I was going to do in life. I didn't want to shut myself up or live in fear. So I just sort of decided on this resolve that I was just going to do what I was going to do otherwise. And I faced a lot of unfortunate situations and interactions with people. You know, we've all faced sexism and misogyny, the very standard on launch sort of stuff, and then also like the effects or the deeper effects of how you're treated and taught differently. And I have experienced a special version of that. And yeah, it just sucks. So it was a couple years of, just like really unfortunate experiences, especially internationally. Just like dealing with people saying awful things to you, like on launch or on landing or online or harassment, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that all sucked. And it really, it really sucked. But it also helped me develop this level of focus, which feels very strong now. And I would be remiss not to mention that as difficult as it was and as much sort of pushback I received, I received so much love and support from people, especially in our national community, from all of these folks, but also from around the world, from Cross Country magazine. So, you know, as difficult as it is being maybe the only trans person that a lot of people know, it's also like, you know, been this amazing experience. And so sort of trying to, or getting to prove that, I don't know.
She deserves to be here.
Yeah. So winning the national championship last year was a big deal for me. It just felt like, especially to the people that harassed me, it was just like, wow, that this is your game, and like I also love it and I belong here. So yeah. Anyway, that's all.
Thanks, Galen. Okay, y'all. So tomorrow's the big day. We start the big one, the super final. 1 sentence goal for the next 2 weeks, next 10 days of racing. Jenny, go.
My goal is to learn as much as I can, fly a little faster every day, and have fun.
I'm just super excited to get to race with the world's best pilots again, and I just would love to have a great result, but I'm just really most interested in having fun. So,
and not to be a broken record, but I am looking forward to having an amazing time playing a game I really like to play.
It's my first super final, so I'm excited just to be here and also fly in beautiful Brazil.
Beautiful. You're all beautiful. Love you. Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription, and it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do, and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.